And we're going to take you to Melbourne now, where the Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey is speaking after the government's economic statement.
Well, the Treasurer has brought down a new economic statement. It is patently obvious. Labor has lost control of the budget and it is losing control of the economy. It is the same old Labor and the same old Kevin Rudd. Today the government announced 4 new tax hikes and revenue measures. The budget is in freefall. The budget has fallen $3 billion a week over the last 10 weeks. Debt is now heading towards $400 billion. Net interest has blown out to $11.5 billion a year. That is the equivalent of 10 new teaching hospitals in Australia every year. But of most concern is the massive deterioration in the jobs market. Nearly 800,000 Australians are going to be unemployed. Labor said that their budget delivered just 10 weeks ago was about jobs and growth. Now we see unemployment rising to nearly 800,000 Australians being unemployed, and we see a significant deterioration in economic growth. If this is the state of the budget before the election, imagine what it's going to look like if Labor is re-elected. We are going to find the truth of the budget numbers only after the election and only after there is a change of government. Whenever Labor gets in trouble, they tax Australian families. The economic statement focuses on taxes, on bank accounts, taxes on motor vehicles, and the fact is Labor can't control expenditure. The simple facts are that at no time in the 9 budgeted years of Labor does spending drop below 24.3% of GDP. Now, the last year of the coalition it was 23.1% of GDP. So this year they are spending $29 billion more than last year and $124 billion more than the last year of the Howard government. When it comes to taxes, revenue is now approaching the same level as a percentage of GDP as the last year of the Howard government. But this year, Labor is collecting still $19 billion more in taxes than last year. And the fact is, we're ending up with more debt. $400 billion. And Labor now acknowledges that they will have to break the $300 billion debt cap in the next few months. If Kevin Rudd does not call an election this weekend, he now needs to bring back the Parliament to lift the debt limit of $300 billion, which the government will break through sometime over the next few months. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have under Labor is more deficits, 8 in a row. Kevin Rudd said the first one was temporary. We have more debt, approaching $400 billion. Labor first said it'd never go above $75 billion. Then they said it'd never go above $200 billion. Then never go above $250 billion. Then they said it'd never go above $300 billion. But it's going to break that limit. And we are seeing more taxes, 43 new or increased taxes under Labor. We're seeing more unemployment going to record levels over the last decade. We're seeing the carbon tax continuing to rise to $38 a tonne. What a con job that was from Kevin Rudd a couple of weeks ago when he said he's going to alleviate the pain for families. He even kept repeating $380 a year. But in this budget, the revenue keeps going up and up and up to $38 a tonne by 2019. The mining tax is still meant to collect $4 billion over the forward estimates, despite the fact they're revising down company tax and capital gains tax. There is a better way, and the better way comes with a change of government. Labor has no strategy, the coalition has a strategy. We are focused on strong economic growth. We are focused on job creation. We are focused on less government spending. Certainly, we are focused on fewer taxes. And ultimately, we are focused on enterprise. Because if you lift the tide, all boats will rise. And the problem is, under Labor, you can see the structural weaknesses, which reflect the fact that the Labor Party has lost control of the budget and it is losing control of the Australian economy. Now, I'm going to ask Andrew to say a few words and then we can come back for some questions.
Well, thanks, Joe. I would just like to reflect on this issue of what Labor has sought to do to deal in a structural sense with what is now clearly a budget emergency. This has been confirmed. We said it 10 weeks ago when they brought down the budget. They poo-pooed what we had to say. It's been confirmed writ large in this statement today. Now, when you look at what they have sought to do, they're faced with an emergency, they've got a budget in chaos. Their response in a structural sense is just more of the same. It's the same old Labor. It is so flat-footed. They have no imagination. They've got no understanding of what levers to pull to get this mess back in control. Just let me go through some of the repeat hits that they've done. What have they done in a structural sense? They've gone back to the public service efficiency dividend. They've gone back to that well. They've gone back to visa charges. They've gone back to ripping more of the foreign aid money away and deferring it. They've gone back to unclaimed superannuation. If you've got more than $6,000, got less than $6,000 in a fund, they'll take it away. Thanks very much. They've gone back to cigarette taxes. They've gone and confirmed that Kevin Rudd's carbon tax will go up to $38 a tonne. They've confirmed that in this budget. They've also added to all of this a tax on savings and wildly optimistic terms of trade. They just will not be delivered. They will not be delivered. And so none of these things, all the things they've done in a structural sense, none of them are going to do anything about confidence. None of them are going to do anything about growth or jobs. These are things that really work against growth and jobs. Now, you add to all of that, so they've done all this structural stuff, and now we're also seeing in this budget statement a return to the notorious money shuffles. So I'll give you one example. You look at the defence budget in this statement. 10 weeks ago, they had scheduled $1 billion spending in 16-17, the surplus year. That's $1 billion that has now been, some of it brought forward, 600 million of it, and 400 million of it pushed out beyond the forward estimates. And surprise, surprise, you get $1 billion saving in 16-17, the surplus year. This is a return to all of this, the nonsense money shuffles that we've seen over the last couple of years. And if you look at this budget, again, 10 weeks ago, the budget, in all of its structural measures, 60% were in fact taxes. Come forward 10 weeks to today, 80% of their structural changes, their savings, are in fact taxes. These are just further hits on families. That's what it's doing, further hits on families. So we've got a government that has got no idea. There is no strategy. There's no coherent strategy how to deal with the problems that are identified today, the mess that's been identified today. They are leading this economy into the eye of an economic storm. What we're seeing is more debt, more taxes, more unemployment, more broken promises, more deficits and more uncertainty. And there's no plan. As I've just pointed out, they are flat-footed. when it comes to trying to deal with this issue. There is no plan as to how to get out of this problem. The only party at this election who's got a plan to grow this economy, to get us back into the black, to grow jobs and to reduce uncertainty and anxiety is the Coalition. Thanks.
Just before we go to questions, I might just add two more points. Number one, Kevin Rudd sent out a treasurer on his L plates today. And that became quite clear when he was blaming China for the massive deterioration in the budget. The fact is, the terms of trade are today, and over the forward estimates, still higher than at any time under the Coalition. Iron ore prices are higher, coal prices are higher. So the terms of trade are higher. And secondly, the Treasurer said we're in pretty good shape compared with the rest of the world, particularly when it comes to jobs. Australia's unemployment rate is now higher than Austria, Germany, Iceland, Japan, Korea, Luxembourg, Mexico and Norway. And whilst our unemployment rate is rising, unemployment is actually falling in Canada, Chile, Denmark, Germany, Iceland, Japan, Korea, Mexico, the United States and the United Kingdom. So our economy is deteriorating whilst the rest of the world is getting better. And we have an L-plate treasurer and an inconsistent and unpredictable and unreliable Prime Minister in charge of the Australian economy. There is a better way. Questions? Well, we are not in a position to start identifying timetables like that. I will not make the same sort of rash promises that the Labor Party does. I do not believe these numbers. And if this is the best that the Labor Party has, we should all fear the worst, because it's only going to deteriorate. If this is what the Labor Party presents on the eve of an election, imagine how bad it is going to be if they're re-elected.
What levers should it be pulling, and can you map out sort of which areas specifically the Coalition is focused on?
Well, for example, we have said that the public service in Canberra is just too large, and we have been upfront with the Australian people and said through natural attrition over the first 2 years, 12,000 will go. The public service is now 20,000 larger than what it was in the last year of the Coalition government. Are Australians getting better service for that? No. There are a whole lot of new bureaucracies that Kevin Rudd has opened up and built. And for example, even today in our education statement, we said we're not going to micromanage the state schools the way Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard want to under the Gonski proposals. Therefore, we will remove some of the bureaucracy, a large chunk of the bureaucracy of Canberra duplicating the job of the states. And secondly, Mr Bowen said, well, hang on, he said they're going to get rid of the school kids bonus. Well, the great irony is Labor wants everyone driving a company car to keep 12 weeks of logbooks to get an FBT entitlement. But if you have a child, you're going to get money and you don't have to prove anything about it. The money comes in. It doesn't have to be used for education. It can be used for anything you want. No questions asked. That just shows the inconsistency in Labor's approach to taxpayers' money.
Just on a couple of specifics,
We will consult with industry sectors, particularly the health industry in relation to tobacco, but we also want to identify what some of the other underlying assumptions are, and we'll be responding in the next few days in relation to specific measures.
what about the bank?
Same, we will consult with the industry sector. As I've said previously in relation, this bank tax, it's another classic. The Labor Party's idea of consultation is to tell people what's going to happen a few days or a few hours before they actually implement it. That's not our view about consultation. We'll go and sit down with all of the affected parties and we'll work it through. We will not have the same knee-jerk reaction to Labor Party announcements in the fashion that they prepare policy.
Will we see a fully costed or rigorously costed set of coalition policies before the...
Yes, emphatically yes.
Do you guarantee that quickly in Labor?
Our bottom line, look, I've been saying it now for years. Labor will never deliver a surplus. It's not in their DNA. They don't know how to live within their means. And sooner or later, Labor's going to run out of taxpayers' money. That's why the debt is now approaching $400 billion. They inherited no net debt. And Labor has delivered over $250 billion of deficits since Kevin Rudd said the first one would be temporary.
What I'm asking, though, is at the end of the campaign, will voters be able to look at the coalition set of books and the Labor set of books, and will the coalition budget position be stronger than Labor?
Our budget position will always be stronger than Labor's. Look at our record. 10 out of 11 budgets were surpluses. We paid off $96 billion of Labor debt. We left them with $70 billion in net assets. Today, they've announced that we're approaching $400 billion of debt, a massive blowout in the interest bill associated with that, and deficits now as far as the eye could see. Labor will never deliver a surplus. The underlying assumptions in this document are misleading because they are going to the mechanical projections in the 2 out years of the budget. And they are assuming the mechanical projections in order to deliver a forecast budget surplus. Now that's ridiculous. The projections look absolutely ridiculous, such as they're expecting a 1.25% fall in unemployment in just 1 year, despite no significant increase in employment growth, or in economic growth, or in nominal growth. It's just not real. The numbers aren't real. And of course, they're not obvious and upfront about the fact that the carbon tax is going to keep going up and up and up, and that even on the forecast associated with Europe today, that is not going to be the case. But their budget is based on that assumption. Well, every time, look, Labor can barely hold a budget from year to year, let alone from week to week. Their numbers keep changing. And what we've seen is a $3 billion a week deterioration in the budget under Labor. They have lost control. Lord knows, if there is a change of government, Lord knows what we're going to inherit. But we stand prepared to climb that mountain. We will do it because we have to. Someone has to do the heavy lifting to get the economy back on the rails, and we stand prepared to do it.
So you're going back with some of the promises or some of the things that you were hoping to promise?
You'll see all of our promises and all of our costings prior to the election and after the publication of PFA. Okay? Sorry.
Just with my deregulation responsibilities, this government, despite promising for every new regulation they brought in, they would remove one, have now had a net increase of just over 20,000 new regulations. Australia, for the first time in our history, now has sovereign risk as identified with Australia. This is killing so much business confidence, it's killing consumer confidence. People are anxious about it. That's why they're saving 10% of their disposable income, when historically we save 1 or 2%. Right? So they are eating away, not just with their loss of control of spending, but the way in which they've sought to regulate and regulate and regulate every extra way business, and that place back realising the great we've got. And at the moment, business best don't know what happened with the budget. They get no. All of these measures we've seen here today, the business community is saying they had no consultation. We saw the Treasurer embarrassed when he was asked the question, how do we go from 2.5% growth, 3%, how do we go from 6.25% unemployment to the predicted 5% in 1 year? He had no answer. They do not have a feel for the economy. They know that they've killed confidence, killed investment, killed interest by foreign investors, and no plan. There's absolutely no plan in this budget that this government's got to address any of those issues. There's so much that we can do to fire up this place.
Mr. Robb, you characterise this as a budget emergency. Do you think the rating agencies have it wrong for giving Australia AAA?
No, we see this clearly as a breakdown of $3 billion a week. The rating agencies, they make their own assessment. But we've got to deter. They'll make their own assessment. What we have to do, we are putting ourselves up as the alternative government. Our assessment is that if a budget in 10 weeks is deteriorating at the rate of $3 billion a week, then in our view it is out of control. We have to live with the consequence of whatever we might inherit if we get the privilege of government. We know that if business sees a budget deteriorating at the rate of $3 billion a week, they will not put up with that. Confidence will not be restored if we don't deal with that. That's why we call it a budget emergency, and it most certainly is. Thank you.
And we might just leave that feed there. Our apologies for the technical problems. We were hearing there from the Shadow Finance Minister, Andrew Robb, and earlier from Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey speaking there in Melbourne. They're giving their response